Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you so much again for joining me, and I'm very excited for today's video because we are making something that maybe you have never made before. It's very different and it's not very common, so I'm very excited to be sharing this with you today. So we are making cheese puffs, and before we continue with the video, there are a couple things that I need you to do. So right now I need you to go and wash your hands if you haven't done that already. And then you need to preheat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, 425. Okay, next I need you to grab a cookie sheet like I have over here and line it with some parchment paper. Okay, so I've just lined it with some parchment paper. I need you to go and do that now. Okay, once you are done those 3 steps, let's continue. So there's a bunch of things that I have on my counter in front of me that you might not be able to see. So I'm just gonna quickly go through what I have in front of me. So what I have is 3/4 cups of water, 3/4. I have butter. I have a stick of butter here. We're not going to be using the whole thing. I have salt. I have black pepper. I have flour, 4 eggs, 3/4 cups of mozzarella cheese. Don't worry about the cups yet. Just make sure you grab the ingredients. I've got mozzarella cheese. I've got parsley. I've got parmesan cheese, and I just have some utensils in front of me as well. So I've got a wooden spoon, a 1-cup measuring cup, I've got my little teaspoon measuring spoons, and I've just got a wooden spoon and a knife and a other spoon. So go ahead and gather those ingredients and then come back, okay? So water, butter, salt, black pepper, flour, 4 eggs, mozzarella cheese, parsley, and parmesan cheese. So it's really important that I mention you don't need these 2 types of cheese. You can actually use whatever kind of cheese you want, but make sure you have 2 types. Okay, so go ahead and grab those if you haven't already, and let's get started. So the first thing we're gonna do is we are going to, in a medium saucepan, bring the water, butter, salt, and ground black pepper to a boil. So I've got my 3/4 cups of water here, and I'm just gonna put that in my saucepan. I'm gonna turn my stove on to medium because it's not gonna take long for this to come to a boil. Okay, now I'm gonna add my 5 tablespoons of butter. Okay, so we've gone over this. Mine here has some measurements for me that I can follow. So if you can get little butter sticks that have little measurements on them, that's great. But if not, please don't worry about it. I will show you what a tablespoon looks like, and then you're just gonna do that 5 times, okay? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. An easy way to put it is it's actually just over 1/4 cup, okay? It's about a tablespoon over a quarter cup. Okay. So I'm gonna show you what a tablespoon looks like, and you're just gonna do that 5 times. So there it is right there. It's just a really small cube. That's a tablespoon. So you're just gonna do 5 of those. And again, please don't worry about it. It's okay if you put a little bit more or a little bit less in there. Okay, so I've added my butter. It's already starting to melt because my water here is coming to a simmer. Now I'm going to add my salt. And for this recipe, we need half a teaspoon of salt. So I've got my salt here. I'm just gonna grab my half a teaspoon measurement there. There we are. Oops, almost. That's a quarter. We're getting there. There we go. So half a teaspoon of salt. And I am going to level it off with my knife just to make sure I'm not putting too much in. So there's my salt. Now we need a pinch of black pepper. So for a pinch of black pepper, I'm just gonna crank maybe 3 times here. Okay, so if you don't have a little, there's my oven at 425. If you don't have one that cranks, just take a pinch out of your pepper and pop it in there. So it's actually coming to a boil already. Like I said, it doesn't take long, but we just need to let all of the butter melt and everything. Okay, so what I'm gonna get you to do is slowly be mixing this as your butter is melting. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get you to bring this to a boil and let it cook for a bit. For maybe, once it's boiling, maybe let it boil for 30 seconds. And then we're gonna come back together and we're gonna do the rest, okay? So make sure your butter's melted and your water has come to a boil, just like how that is there, and then we'll come back. Okay, everybody, welcome back. So at this point, you should have brought your water to a boil, your butter should be melted, and I have reduced my heat to low, okay? So again, it shouldn't have taken long from where we left off, but now we are gonna start making the actual dough. Now this is where the recipe gets very interesting. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna stir in our flour until it forms a dough, okay? So what I have already measured out is 1 cup of flour. So I'm gonna need you to measure out 1 cup of flour and make sure you level it off with a knife. That's very important. Once you do that, we are going to add the flour directly to our pot. And it's actually gonna slowly start to form a dough. Okay, so we're just gonna mix that in. I've just got my my stove on low here, and it's gonna form a dough, okay? This is where it gets very interesting. So there we are, it's forming a dough. It almost, you know what, it almost looks like Play-Doh, but it's definitely not. But yeah, it should have like a very doughy kind of look there. Okay, so make sure, it's really important that your stove is on low now. So what you're actually gonna do, once you have this dough, it didn't take long, we are going to cook it on the stove for 2 minutes to dry out the dough, okay? So we're just drying it out. So for 2 minutes, I'm just gonna kind of be folding my dough, kind of like what I'm doing here, mixing it a little bit like that. We'll do this, I'll stay on here, we'll do this together. So I'm on low here, And I'm just kind of mixing my dough. I don't want to just let it sit without stirring because I don't want it to burn. So just keep mixing it. And you should eventually have this just really big ball of dough. So again, you can use any kind of cheese for this recipe. I'm just using mozzarella and parmesan cheese because that's what the original recipe calls for. But you can use any two kinds of cheese that you would like. Okay, so I think we're almost done stirring this here. It's almost been 2 minutes. So I'm just gonna do this a couple more times for maybe about 30 more seconds. And I just have a giant dough, and that's what we want. Okay. So I think that's good. I'm gonna turn off my stove. Okay, so what I need you to do is grab a large bowl, okay? So pause the video, grab a large bowl, and then you're gonna put your dough into that bowl, okay? So place your dough into a large bowl off of the stove, and then come back as soon as you've done that. Okay, everybody, so I have transferred my dough into a bowl here, and you should have done the same thing. So another thing that I want you to grab is a fork, and I want you to grab a small bowl to crack your eggs in. So we are ready to complete the last few steps of this recipe. So as soon as you grab a fork and a bowl, we are going to slowly start adding our 4 eggs one at a time. And we need to mix well between each addition. So I'm gonna go ahead and crack one of my eggs into a small bowl. And remember, I always do that just in case I get any eggshells in. It's much easier to get the eggshells out from the bowl versus in this bowl. So before I add this, I'm actually just gonna mix it just a little bit so that it mixes a little bit easier in with my dough here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour my egg in there. So shortly, our dough is not going to look like much of a dough anymore. It's going to get really liquidy from all the eggs that we're adding. But then as soon as we add our cheese, that's when it's gonna get kind of thick again. So we're just gonna mix well until it's all combined. You can use a wooden spoon for this. I'm using a fork. I'll see how it goes with a fork, and if I need a wooden spoon, I'll go ahead and do that. So you're just gonna mix it until it's combined. I'm gonna try with a wooden spoon here and see if that works well as well. Yeah, so either one, a fork or a wooden spoon is fine. Okay, so there's my first egg. I'm gonna go ahead and crack my second egg in my bowl here. And I'm just going to grab a new fork. And I'm just gonna beat my egg a little bit. So there's my second egg. Lots of eggs in this recipe. Just keep stirring. I know it might be a little bit awkward to stir, but just do your best. As soon as we add the cheese, it's gonna be much easier. Okay. And don't worry, your dough is never going to completely undo itself, because it still needs to be a dough when we drop it onto our pans here. So don't panic if it looks kind of funny. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add my third egg here. So there's my third egg. I'm just gonna mix it up a little bit. So far, so good. No eggshells for me. All right, and I'm just gonna mix it up again. So our dough is definitely not a dough anymore. It's definitely much more liquidy from all the eggs we've been adding. And so this recipe is actually, these little cheese puffs are very comparable to cream puffs. So they're gonna have a very light and airy inside. And they're gonna be nice and cheesy and delicious. So I'm gonna add my fourth egg here. Let's see if I can do all 4 eggs without getting any shells. Yes. So I'm gonna go ahead and beat that up a little bit. Okay, so there's my last egg. So I'm just gonna transfer to a fork just for now. But I'm gonna keep my wooden spoon out because I might need that later. Okay, so I'm just gonna stir here. I'm gonna kind of stir quickly, make sure it's all mixed in nicely. So the 4 eggs have really, once you get to your 4th egg, it's really gonna start going into like a liquid here. And you're gonna have to stir fast and hard. So with a fork, it's a little bit easier at this point. Woo, you gotta use your muscles for this. We're almost there. Okay, perfect. So now at this point, I kind of just have like a liquidy dough. And that's perfect because now we're gonna be adding in our cheese and our parsley. And keep your wooden spoon on standby because it's gonna be easier to mix with that when we get to that step. Okay. So I'm just gonna put this aside for a moment, my bowl here. Okay, so now we need 3/4 cups of mozzarella cheese and we need 1/2 cup of parmesan cheese. So I'm gonna go ahead and do my mozzarella cheese first. So go ahead and grab a cheese grater and a wooden cutting board or any sort of cutting board that you have available. So I've got my cutting board and I'm just gonna grab my cheese grater here. All right. So I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to see what I'm doing as I'm grating it here, but just grate your cheese and then we will measure it out. So I'm doing it on kind of the normal setting here for grating cheese. I'm not on the small one at all. And you're gonna stop and measure as you go, okay? So we need 3/4 cups, okay? So I've got my little 1/4 measuring cup here. I'm gonna grab my bowl. I'm just gonna try and move this over so that you can see better what I'm doing. Perfect. So I'm just gonna see here. Okay, so I'm gonna do heaping heaping measurements of the cheese. So there's 1/4. That's because I love cheese. There's my 2/4, and I only need 1 more quarter of cheese, of the mozzarella cheese, that is. So that's about another 1/4. So there's my 3/4 of mozzarella cheese. So I'm gonna go ahead and move this aside. Now it's time for the Parmesan cheese. So you will be needing 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. It is going to need to be shredded. So this that I have here is actually pre-shredded. So I don't actually need to shred it myself. So I've got my 1/2 cup here, and I'm just going to start placing some of my cheese in here. Okay, so that's about a heaping 1/2 cup there. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in. Okay, the last thing we're gonna add is our parsley. So I just have some parsley leaves here, and we need a 1/4 teaspoon of parsley. So that's not a lot. So go ahead and grab your 1/4 teaspoon. Okay, so I'm gonna do a heaping 1/4 teaspoon for this one, okay? So I'm just gonna sprinkle that in there. Please pause the video if I'm going too fast. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and grab my wooden spoon here, and I'm just gonna start mixing it all together. And it's going to form a dough again, okay? It's gonna be almost like a cookie dough. So we're just gonna mix it all together. So we went from having a dough to a liquid dough to having another dough. So just mix it in until it's all mixed together nicely. Okay. Perfect. So I'm just gonna grab my fork to get all of this extra stuff off. Awesome. So that didn't take long. That only took me maybe 15 seconds to do that part. It formed another dough quite quickly. Okay, so now we're on to the very last step. So what I need you to do is I need you to go ahead and grab your cookie sheet that has your parchment paper on it, and then we're gonna start scooping our dough onto our parchment paper. So go ahead and grab that, and then you're going to need to grab about a tablespoon here, okay? So I'm just gonna move that there, and I'm gonna try and bring over my cookie sheet. So go ahead and do that. Lots of steps in this recipe, but I'm very excited to see how these turn out. So now this is almost like cookies, okay? So you're just gonna take about a heaping tablespoon, okay? So I just kind of went in there, scooped, and I'm just gonna gently push it off with my thumb, just like that, okay? So it's quite sticky, which is fine. You just might have very messy hands after. And I am placing these about 2 inches apart from each other. So I'm gonna probably do 3 in a row. And then there's very specific baking instructions for these. So I will do my best to explain that to you along the way. So this is going to be, like I mentioned before, kind of like a cream puff. So if you bite into it and it's very light and airy and it seems like it's full of air, that's actually perfectly fine. That's exactly what this is. Okay, so I'm almost done this pan here. So you're gonna need probably 2 pans to do this. And again, I'm just dropping by rounded tablespoonfuls. Okay, there we are. So now now it's time to bake them. For the baking instructions, listen very, very carefully. Your oven should currently be at 425 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? You are going to bake these for 10 minutes in your 425 degree oven. You're going to then reduce the heat on your oven to 380 degrees Fahrenheit. 380 degrees. And then you're going to bake it for another 20 to 25 minutes at 380 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, maybe get your parents to help you with this if you're not too sure how this is going to work. But essentially, bake these for 10 minutes at 425. Reduce the heat to 380 degrees and continue to bake them for 20 to 25 minutes. I will come back to show you the results. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was easy to follow along with. It's a bit different from some of the other things that we've been doing, so I'm very excited to see how this turns out. As always, send me pictures of your results. I absolutely love to see what you make. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.